Hey, this is Warren Sprouse. You're on the Bible Forum. We're here every Sunday night from 8 to 10 p.m. Eastern Time, that is. We look at life through a biblical lens. We solve all the world's problems in 2 hours or less. We're looking at the political aspects of this past week. We're going to go around the world, seeing what's been going on, making comment as we go. We did have an election, you know that, right here in these United States. But we had an election where nobody won. Well, we got Donald Trump, and we hope and pray that he's half the man his mouth says he is. And so far, it hasn't been all that bad. He's got the left in a tizzy, and that's a good thing. I hope to see more of that a little bit further in his administration. And we will definitely look at it a little bit more closely later in the show as we begin to unpack some of the other topics that we're going to be talking about. But for now, the left seems to be learning lessons. They're doing it the hard way, but that's how people learn. And some of them are actually taking it to heart. One lesson I wish for them is, quote, how to raise up children to be adults, end of quote. Have you heard about the snowflake kids? The term was given to babies rescued from abortions initially, but the media's attached that term to junior high, high school, and college-age students, maybe even some young adults who aren't in school, but people who apparently can't function because Donald Trump is our president-elect. They're crying in the streets. They're unable to study. A friend of the show sent me a quote from Dennis Prager on the subject. Dennis Prager is a talk show host, author, educator. Dennis Prager says that the younger generation is suffering from a deficiency of vitamin N. They have never, or they have rarely ever been told no. They were given everything they asked for without having to work for it. They can't function without a cell phone. They can't carry on a simple conversation face-to-face, one-on-one. They can't answer simple questions about life. And yes, they have a lack of education, which has been carried over into our churches. Prager says, I hate pew Bibles. As people who have attended church for 20 plus years have to ask, what page is that? They want a number. Look up Matthew 25. Well, what page is that on? When asked to turn to a given passage, pastors can no longer tell their people to underline or mark certain passages the way we were all taught to do, because that's a pew Bible, it's not yours. Memorizing scripture? We don't do that anymore. Newer translations are usually difficult to memorize anyway. And he says, I know, I'm preaching to the choir. But sing on, my boy. Sing on. President Obama and German Chancellor Angela Merkel were blaming the internet for disrupting the forces of globalism this week, suggesting that technology is making it more difficult to unite people behind a common purpose. Because, well, with the internet, global communications, the clash of cultures is much more direct. That's what our president said during the press conference in Berlin. People feel, he said, I think, less certain about their identity, less certain about economic security. He also predicted that the rise of technology needed to be managed to give world citizens more control beyond the simplistic answers found online. His German counterpart agreed. I'd like to interpret for you, not the German, the English. When they talk about managed, when they talk about information being managed, it's a euphemism for controlled, which is exactly what the switch from U.S. control over ICANN, that's the Global Internet Committee that kind of watches things and gives out the URLs and that sort of thing, gave it over to what they called a consortium of international partners. That was November 1st of this year, 2016. ICANN manages a number of technical functions that help computers locate the correct servers and websites. The reason ICANN can operate the entire World Wide Web root zone is that it has the status of a legal monopolist, stemming from its contract with the Commerce Department that makes ICANN an instrumentality of government. Now, without the U.S. contract, ICANN would seek to be overseen by another governmental group so as to keep its antitrust exemption. Can you imagine what group there would be globally, a governmental group that they could appeal to? Well, authoritarian regimes have already proposed that ICANN become part of the United Nations. I can only imagine why. So much for the Obama pledge that the United States would never be replaced by a government-led or an intergovernment organization solution. This makes President Obama's admission to German Chancellor Merkel's agreement all the more significant. He said, quote, "We need to manage technology," end of quote. He did all that in context with their realization that people have too much information, a situation that makes it far more difficult to govern, a situation that made it more difficult for Hillary to get elected. It's code for people know too much. It's making it hard on people like us to accomplish our secret goals. The Breitbart website this week talked about President-elect Donald Trump, how that he said Bill Ford, executive chairman of Ford Motor Company, called him this week. Trump put out a tweet, "Just got a call from my friend Bill Ford, chairman of Ford, who advised me that he will be keeping the Lincoln plant in Kentucky. No Mexico." Ford builds the Lincoln MKC small sport utility vehicle at its Louisville assembly plant in Kentucky alongside the Ford Escape SUV. Ford has never said it was considering moving MKC production to Mexico, where it already builds the Lincoln MKZ sedan at its factory in Hermosillo. The move, if it were to occur, would not have shut down the U.S. facility. The move would not have laid off a single employee here in this country. The move was designed, talked about, to make room to assemble more Escapes, which are selling faster than the larger Lincolns. So to get the Lincolns out of this, and we can put more emphasis on this. Anyway, during the campaign, Trump criticized Ford for planning to do just that, to move their small car production to Mexico, where wages were 80% lower. During the campaign, he threatened to slap Ford's Mexican-built cars with a 35% tariff. He also said he would terminate the North American Free Trade Agreement, which lets goods flow between Mexico and the U.S. and between Canada and the U.S. without paying tariffs. Ford confirmed late Thursday that it has told Trump its Lincoln SUV made at the Louisville assembly is going to stay right there in Kentucky. I know, but you're just going to have to get used to Trump's exaggerations. He takes a little bit of information, he blows it up, and it makes him look good. And it played well on the stump. He's like a carnival barker. He says outrageous things to make points and to get our attention. We need to be careful, because people like this also use that kind of hyperbole and drama to misdirect our attention. Keep your ears open, keep your brain engaged. There was an announcement this week that the FANG tech stocks declined 9% immediately after the election. Stocks were going up, but the FANG tech stocks were going down. And Wall Street is fretting that President Donald Trump could be a modern-day trust buster. I know. I didn't know what a FANG tech was either. FANG stocks: Facebook, Amazon, Netflix, and Google. FANG. FANG. How's that? There had been a stunning double-digit underperformance of tech stocks versus other market sectors since Donald Trump's election. Ground zero for that reversal of fortunes involved 4 U.S. huge tech stocks that they now call FANG. Their performance has dominated stock performance over the last 2 years. This group rose 83% in 2015, compared to only 1.19% for everything else. FANG stocks contributed their leadership this year, or continued their leadership in the stock market this year, with a 15% gain through the end of September. Everything else was working closer to 6%. The biggest contributor to these companies' success had been the wildly favorable U.S. regulatory environment that they enjoyed under the Obama administration. It is just entirely possible that they have seen the handwriting on the wall, or they think they have. Prior to November 8th, these FANG stocks expected a more supportive relationship. They expected Hillary to get elected. But according to London's Financial Times, Trump administration policies threaten to place tariffs on offshore tech supply chains, tighten immigration affecting H-1B visas, and may launch a new era of antitrust scrutiny that could bust up internet monopolies. Monopolization is defined by the Federal Trade Commission as an unlawful conduct by a single firm that unreasonably restrains competition by creating or maintaining monopoly power. This kind of activity has been prohibited by law since the Sherman Antitrust Act. You remember that? That was 1890. Creative minds have found ways around it. And since it favors large Democrat donors, who really cares? Our U.S. debt is hovering right shy of $20 billion right now. Do you check the debt clock? All you have to do is go to usdebtclock.org. I have a link on my computer, and I click it every once in a while just to see what's going on. And sometimes I do it when I watch the gold commercials, because they show you the debt clock, but it's always 3 or 4 months behind. Only conservatives talk about the dangers of running up debt. And they're not talking about it a whole lot. Have you heard anything about it this year? What's that mean? Well, having that kind of debt means that we're living above our means by a ratio that is unhealthy. We have got 25% of our annual income in unsecured debt. You can't do that at home without it impacting your life, and neither can we. We just keep borrowing more money against nothing, just spending it, and our creditors are getting paid, and one day it's possible they'll call in their loans. And these are a lot of offshore debtors. If you're earning $50,000 a year and you're spending $12,000 more than you earn every year, and you're only paying back a portion of that debt, 2%, 3%, what's your credit cards look? When you owe $5,000, you're only paying what, $30, $50 a month, something like that. The interest is cranking those things up. You get the statements that if you pay the minimum, this is how long it'll take to pay off that $1,000. And it's years, because the interest is compounding on top of it. Now the interest is low. if you've got a good credit rating and you got a new card. But some people are still using old cards with 12% interest. They don't even know what the interest is. Doesn't take a genius to see how destructive this is. And we got some pretty smart people in our government, but nobody seems to care. A country where no one wants to lend them money is a servant of whoever will help them. And the help they get will only further enslave them. No country should have this kind of debt. The community organizer is not expected to understand such thing. The money he spends is not his own, never has been, and it's always been there. But the businessman who lives and dies by the art of the deal, he does understand this stuff. Of course, time will tell how corrupting Washington can be. When the politicians who run up the debt have to pay double or triple the tax rate of everybody else, we'll see a reduction in national debt. But it won't come before. Have you noticed how little we're hearing about the Middle East since the election? Have they stopped bombing and gassing the children? Funny, isn't it?